Coach Sweeney by Daniel Thomas Moran. There were few things in high school that produced more trauma and humiliation than what they called physical education, and what we simply called gym. When I was barely in school, President Kennedy, who was always tan and handsome with sunglasses and gleaming teeth, decided that America's kids needed to be physically as well as mentally fit if they were to grow up and win the future for America. He was always photographed playing golf or tossing a football. If we had only known that then he had a bad back, had sex with every woman he met, and was always jacked up on all kinds of drugs, it would have made it easier on us. Of course, within 10 years, we were all jacked up on all kinds of drugs and having sex with everyone we met as well. A short history of the 60s there, I suppose. But we were required to show up in gym class 3 days a week. We went into the locker room and quickly, so no one would notice, tore off our clothes and put on our gym suit, which included a medieval thing they called a jockstrap, which was something like a thong for boys, and which was supposed to protect the family jewels. What it did was make us feel inadequate and humiliated and itchy to boot. What was worse was that we were supposed to take all of that paraphernalia home to ask our mothers to wash them every week. More humiliation. At 16, I was hoping my mother would never associate me with something like a jockstrap. It was unthinkable, but we did take the stuff home to be washed regularly, every time the school year ended. By then, after some 150 wearings, it was ripe in ways that cannot be described by any words I know in the English language. My own mother might have burned it and just replaced it without me realizing. So we would put on this cheesy stuff and run around for about 40 minutes as our new perspiration gently awakened every dried stench that lived in our gym suits, resulting in smells that would wilt flowers. People within a mile of the school would close their windows even in the summer if they were downwind from our gym on a school day. And we had to put it on for each class, including the dreaded jockstrap. Every so often the coach would yell for us to stand in place, and then he would say, "Jock check," at which point we would have to grab hold of the elastic and stretch it out for inspection. If you had not put on your jock, it implied that you were guilty of not respecting the coach, or worse, the family jewels, and you incurred punishments that might today be called enhanced conformity techniques. You were made to do something you could never really do, like run a mile around the track in the bitter cold, or do 50 push-ups, or worse than that, the dreaded squat thrust. My very soul aches just thinking about squat thrusts, and I will say no more about them. Consider it an act of mercy. The coach that everyone feared the most was a guy named Coach Sweeney. He was one of those guys that lived in athletic gear, never had to wear real shoes, and wore a whistle to work. He was an All-American in something like 12 sports, and his bite was worse than his bark. He never yelled much. He just quietly doled out misery and went about his business doing what President Kennedy had demanded. It was not easy for him. When I was in high school, it was the years that followed Woodstock and the Summer of Love, assassinations and riots in the streets, and man, we were a ragtag mix of freaks, potheads, and slackers even on our best day. Half of us smoked and would run out behind the school right after gym class to grab one before the next bell. Even the smart guys from the National Honor Society were all long hairs with scraggly mustaches and faded jeans. High school was without decorum in the early 1970s. Coach Sweeney did not approve, and he did what he could to rein in his peasants in the little kingdom he ruled over. He had really liked the 1940s and the 1950s, and he was not going to let them just disappear without a fight. I'm not certain that anyone would agree, but I found Coach Sweeney was the funniest guy in the entire school. He had a very dry sense of humor that just cracked me up. What cracked me up more was that almost no one else saw it that way. And so I was often laughing like a hyena at something the coach had said, and no one knew why. There were two occasions that come immediately to mind that I hope will illustrate my point. One day in gym, we were playing basketball, having chosen up teams, and all of us running up and down and flinging the ball every which way, to the coach's great consternation. Aside from being a phys ed teacher, he was coach of the varsity basketball team. As was always the case, there were guys in a gym class who played on the high school team, and other guys who always managed to get picked last. They often wore glasses and tucked in their gym shirt into their gym pants. I always felt bad for those guys. I fell somewhere in the middle. Maybe some of the basketball team guys felt bad for me. I doubt it. They were 16 or 17, all school heroes and hormoned up to the gills. They wanted to annihilate anything that got in their way, especially in gym class where the pickings were easy. Knocking one of the guys with the glasses on their keisters while making some impossible shot made them feel really good. So here you had this wonderful little model of manhood as it is well practiced or not in America. So as I said, we're running around like chickens right after the fox snuck into the coop, and one of the guys with the tucked-in pants tries to stop one of the Wonder Boys from making a shot, and he really gets his thumb jammed. I'm sure I could hear the sound of it. It is one of those things that has happened at least once to anyone who's ever played basketball. You almost wish it were broken just so you could justify your reaction to the pain of it. So the game stops and the kid comes over to Coach Sweeney and shows him the ailing thumb, and Coach Sweeney gave it a quick appraisal and told the kid what he should do. He handed him his stopwatch and gently helped him position his aching thumb on the button on the top and said to him that this would help a lot. He said that when this big hand here gets to the number 12 on top, push your thumb down on the button and yell, "Time!" I was standing behind this when it happened, and I was not sure that I was able to return to the game for trying so hard to not laugh out loud. Even when Coach Sweeney was being funny, you can never be sure how he would react to you laughing at him. So I choked on a laugh for a while and hoped that he would not notice. Another day, we were all sitting on our alphabetized lines like little Indians, and Coach Sweeney was calling the roll, as they say. When he got to my friend Ken McStein, he said, "Now, Ken, this is an unusual surname, and I would like to say it correctly. Just how is it pronounced?" The guy sitting next to me was named Tom. I won't tell you his last name for fear he would come looking for me. At age 16, he had very long hair and a beard and wore a leather coat even indoors. If Coach Sweeney had let him wear it in gym class, he would have done squat thrusts in it. In the 1970s, people who wore leather jackets like that were called rockos, a term that had its origins in the 1950s when they were more often called greasers because of the grease they put in their hair to slick it back. No one did that anymore. They had long hair instead. Either way, it was best advised to steer clear of these people, something I could never manage because Tom the Rocco's hall locker was next to mine all 4 years of high school. Despite lack of any proof, I always suspected that Tom actually liked me, but nonetheless, he preferred to greet me by punching me in the shoulder, hard. Dear Tom, how I don't miss him. So Coach Sweeney asks this question, and Tom starts laughing, and even in the 1950s, Coach Sweeney would have relished a chance to get one of these tough guys off guard. So the coach asked Tom what was so funny, and Tom foolishly tried hard to not say exactly, but the coach had Tom in his sights and persisted. He had one of those kinds of smiles you might see on a leopard when it notices that one of the antelopes has strayed a little far from the herd. So Tom finally said he just thought it was odd that Coach Sweeney could not figure out how to say Ken's last name, so the coach asked Tom how he would say it, and Tom said in a clear voice, Mac Stein. So the coach says that was not quite so obvious to him, and that he had a kid in an earlier class with a very similar name and wondered if Tom might help him pronounce that one as well. The coach said that the kid's name was spelled Macchine. Tom answered right away and said, Macchine. The coach said, actually, the kid pronounces it machine. That was the first and only time I ever got to laugh at Tom the Rocco, and I did. That summer, I had Coach Sweeney for driver's ed. I'll save that story for another time and only say that I passed, and that we were not all killed when the ladder flew off the pickup truck we had been trailing behind on the interstate, or that time I tried to beat a yellow light at Sunrise Highway. I'm still happy about that.